Hello, welcome to Ask the Admin, brought to you by Bailey. Excuse me. Thank you for joining us this morning. Um, Today's topic, we're going to be talking about Apex. I am John Jones, a solution architect here at Bailey, and with me we have Frederick Barron, a technical architect, and he'll be helping with most of the presentation today. He's one of our head developers in the company. As we go through the webinar today, this is meant to be an interactive webinar, and we will have a couple of polls that come up periodically and questions for you to answer, as well as we're happy to answer any questions that you guys have for us. So please ask your questions, send them to us, whether they relate to today's topic or not. Send over your questions to us. We're happy to take anything that you've got. As we've been going through these sessions, this is an interactive webinar, and we do encourage you to follow along with past and future webinars. We started this a few weeks ago with a new org building from scratch and a new company. Every week we've built upon that new org. And you can see those previous presentations on our YouTube channel. Again, we encourage you to follow along with us and use your own dev work. Bring your questions to us. We're happy to answer those questions for you as we go. As I mentioned, today we're going to jump into learning Apex. We've been building this based on a company, Universal Boxes, which is a big company we've been building up, a subsidiary to Universal Containers, who manufacture boxes of all shapes and sizes for customers around the world. Everything that we've been building has been based around setting up this new company, their sales processes, their support processes, automations, and things that way. So today we're going to be talking about how to improve on your automations and increase the automations and performance of your org through Apex. So with that, we're going to turn the time over to Fred to walk us through using Apex to enhance our org.
All right, thank you, John. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about what Apex is. The official definition of Apex is that it's a development platform for building software on a service on top of Salesforce. So let's kind of break that down a little bit. The simple thing is Apex is Salesforce's programming language. It allows us to automate and create a lot of neat things inside of Salesforce. We can customize it to do just about anything that we need Salesforce to do. So we are going to jump straight into the demo today. We're going to be spending almost all of today's training in Salesforce. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about where we're at with Universal Boxes. So Universal Boxes has opportunities, and when these opportunities are, one, an order fulfillment is created for manufacturing to start building the boxes. So we've got an order fulfillment here. And this one, these will have, this is one of our test ones, so not all the data is filled in, but they'll have a width, height, depth, a type of material, and colors. What we're going to do today is we are going to build a trigger so that when this order fulfillment is created, our inventory is automatically reduced. So we have here our wood inventory. We have a quantity on hand, and this quantity is going to be subtracted every time that we create an order fulfillment so that we know how much of this particular material that we have. So first of all, let's get into how do we get to Apex. Where do we find it at? There's a couple of different spots. You can go into Setup, into Develop, and you have Apex classes and triggers. I'm going to go ahead and go into the classes. We'll have a couple of them in here already. See if that loads up. Okay, it's working on it. My computer just slowed down. There it goes. So you see, we actually have quite a few of them in here. We've installed some managed packages, and those will show up in here. The one specifically that we want to look at today, we are going to look at our inventory management utility and inventory management dispatcher. We also have a trigger that we will be looking at today. So I can click on this edit, pull it up. The other way that you can get to the Apex is through the developer console. I prefer to work in the developer console instead of this here. It's a little bit easier to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. So you'll see here we've got the developer console coming up here. We have some tabs along the bottom. We can look at our debug logs. We can run tests. And there's a couple of other things we can do here. And then we can edit our code. So this is one that I created for our trigger. The way that we do it here at iBailey is we use what's called a dispatcher utility framework. So if I pull up the trigger itself, you're going to see that there's really no logic in the trigger. And the reason that we do this is it makes it a lot easier to test and to develop. I only have one thing here, and that's calling my dispatcher. We'll look at that in a little bit. So I've got a few methods. Calculate material. This one here, which doesn't return anything, I'm actually ended up not using that, so we can delete that. Wait a second. No, I did use that. That is not the... Let me pull up this new one. I have changed that, and that is not the updated code. Where'd my utility go? There it is. Sorry about that. Okay. Here's the updated code. So I've got a function that's going to use up the inventory. So what we've done is we've just really programmed out everything that we need to make this work, and then we're going to call it from the trigger. And we're going to modify this slightly. So let me go back into our opportunity here. We're going to create that new order fulfillment. And before I do that, let's set this to something that we know, just so we can see that it changes. And I'm going to clone an existing order fulfillment just so I don't have to fill everything back in. So we've got width, depth, height. It's going to be wood. One of the things that we haven't done yet is we also have in our inventory, we have our tracking ink levels. So the second part of this would be to add in subtracting ink based on the color that was selected. That's a little bit more complicated. We won't be doing that today. So I'm going to save that. Let's go back over to our inventory item. Let's refresh that page. And you'll notice here that our quantity went down. Now this is figuring out how many square feet of material we need based on the box size and the quantity, the number of units that are being ordered. It's a pretty simple thing there. Now, a couple of things to know about when you're doing Apex. Salesforce requires at least 75% code coverage. And what that is, let's get into those really quick, the tests. So tests are a way to test your code to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So I have these tests here, some more code. I have this one, calculate material test, and all I'm doing is I'm calling that method, and I'm making sure that the information is sent back right. So in order to deploy to production, you're going to have these tests, and you're going to have at least 75% code coverage. Let's do one thing here really quick. I was looking at this earlier, and one of the things that I want to do, this line 16 right here, this is calculating out how much material we're using. This is an exact amount. So let's say that we have maybe a 10% overage that we want to, maybe we have a little bit of waste there. So I'm just going to add that in and go ahead and save it. And that's going to change our, I'm not sure what is going on there. Let me try refreshing my dev console. So that's the basics of Apex. With Apex, we can do triggers. Triggers will run on, you can have them run on inserting a record, updating a record, deleting records. Really, anytime that you change information in the database, you can run a trigger. You can also do visual force pages with controllers. The controllers would be Apex code. So we have a process in here that if we go to an account, we can create a new order. This new order is actually calling a visual flow. So we can very quickly, this was designed so salespeople could very quickly put in a customer order. We did this a few weeks ago. I'll just leave the colors. And that's going to create an order. Now, if we wanted to change this page, make it change the layout, maybe add a logo to it, then we could redo that page into Visual Force. It would take some development work. Doing it the way we did it, it's all quick development, so an administrator can do it. We could change it if we wanted to make something that was customer-facing. We definitely want to do a Visual Force so that we could change the look. Let's go back to our developer console and see. It is not sure what is going on there. Try closing this out and opening it back up. Of course, when we're doing a demo, something that worked before when we were going through our setting up our training course doesn't work. So all right, here we go. So let's put that back in. That's going to give us a 10% overage. And there's a lot of things we could do here. If we wanted to, we could put this into a setting. So your admin could change it. If you decide that you need more, need less, there's a lot of stuff that we could do. All right. Clone this, forget real quick, and we're going to update that inventory. We're at 800 right now, so last time it subtracted 200. Let's see if that works. And it looks like it worked correctly. So let's go back. I briefly showed you this, but let's go back to the tests really quick. Let's talk about how to run those. There's a couple of different ways that you can run them. And again, the tests are going to make sure that your code is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So if you've written a good test, then you know that you've written good code, because if your test fails, then your code, you need to look at your code. So we're going to go New Run. I'm going to pick our inventory management utility. I can pick specific tests. I have 2 of them in here. I'm going to select both of them, and I'm going to run it. So you can see we have failure here, the red X. Both of them failed. And we're going to see material calculation was off, expected 22, actual 0.168. And this is actually this was actually kind of expected here. I'll show you why. As I was going through this in our order fulfillment, our box sizes are in inches, and we're keeping track of our material in square feet. So originally I had this calculating inches, and I changed it to calculate square feet. So I need to update these numbers so that we're actually looking at square feet instead of square inches. One other way that you can run tests, again, you can do it through setup. And you're always going to want to run your tests before you deploy. They will run when you do a change, deploy code and do a change set. And it's a lot easier to run them before you do that. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to select the same thing. Now this is through setup. And we're going to let this run. And I expect this is going to fail because we're running the exact same tests. But what you can do here is you can queue up a bunch of tests, run them, and then go through and see what failed. So we can click on these, see what the failures are, view the error messages, and then go back and fix our code. So that is the basics of Apex. I'd really recommend, if you want to learn more, we're not going to get into a lot of the language, just what you can do with it today. But if you want to learn more about the language of Apex, there's some really good trailheads. If you go to Salesforce trailhead. And that concludes our demo today. John, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions here. So you were talking about having 75% test coverage. And the question is, where do I find what my test coverage is?
That is a great question. There's a couple of places that you can find it. One is we can go in here to our Apex classes. And there's this link right here, estimate your organization's code coverage. And while we're doing that, while that's going, I'm going to go ahead and fix this so that we have coverage on this class we've been working on. Normally, I would not copy and paste from the failure like this, but this is, in the interest of time, I'm going to do it. Normally, what I would do is I would go through and actually calculate out what it should be and paste it in here. That's the wrong number. All right, that other one, I'm going to go ahead and save this. That other one should be done now, so we'll go back over there. So you see here, code coverage is 3%. So we are missing a lot of code coverage. And this is throughout the entire organization, how much code coverage we have. So we're missing quite a bit in this org to be able to deploy this to production. If you want to see an individual class, you can go into the developer console and you'll see here code coverage none. If we rerun this test run, we should have, so now we're getting green, so now we should have code coverage on this class. You'll see that this one has 64%. So if we select this code coverage, you're going to see everything in blue has code coverage. So we have an entire method right here that we have absolutely no code coverage on. And this is one I haven't written the test for this one yet. If we write the test for this, you'll notice nothing else is red. We'll have 100% code coverage on this, and we'll be good to go on that class. So that's where you can see the code coverage on an individual class or for your entire organization. Let's go back and run this again now that we've added that. If a test fails, it's not going to count it for the code coverage. This code coverage only counts passing tests.
Is there a way to generate a list that shows you each of your Apex classes and how much coverage it is, like in a spreadsheet format?
That is a very good question. What you can do, there's a couple of different ways to do that. One of the things you'll see here, down here at the bottom, bring this up, and this is for just this test run. You'll see the classes here and what their code coverage is. So just this test run, we've got a lot of classes here that have 0%. Let's do a new run, and I only have 2 tests in here. So we're going to run all the tests that we have for this org. And one of the reasons this org has such low test coverage is that this is a developer org, and we really haven't concentrated on making sure that we've got full coverage on everything. So now we've got this list here showing our code coverage. When I run both of them, we've got a 64% here, we've got 86% here, and we've got a lot of these that have absolutely no coverage. So that's how you can see a list of it. One of the other things that we do is we like to use Sublime with Maven's Mate. Let me pull that up. So this is Sublime, and all of the code was written in here and then it gets sent to Salesforce. Sublime with Maven's Mate also has a unit test. So we can run the same tests, get the test results, and this will take a minute here. If you have a lot of tests in your org, then you're going to want to run very specific tests and not run all of them every time. And so as you can see, it can take a little while to run tests. The more tests that you're running, the longer it takes. And this is going to give me the same thing. So you see here, I've got my list. It's showing that my tests have passed. And then I have the option to go to class coverage. And this is going to show me what my class coverage is. And same thing as the developer console. As I scroll down, I can see the red here that this is not covered. Let's go to our other one. We can see we've got a few lines here that are not covered also. some of this I'm not too worried about. This one is catching an exception. This is catching an error. There are ways to test this, but we're really, if our error handling is working, we're really not too worried about that. So we could work on this one. That's a great question. How do we tell what's covered? Do we have any other questions before we finish up here?
Just one more. You were talking about deploying to production. So where do you, in a standard setup, not a dev org, where do you build your code? And then how do you deploy that to production?
Okay, in a standard setup, you're going to have production, and then you're going to have a sandbox. All of your code is going to be developed in the sandbox. You don't want to develop in production. What if you, accidentally create something that deletes all of the accounts? You would want to make sure that you develop in the sandbox, that you test it in the sandbox. And it's also recommended that you do user acceptance testing in the sandbox. So what we can do here is we can do an outbound chain set once we've developed everything. And this is the same as pushing anything else. If you're pushing new custom objects, any other metadata, code is really considered metadata. So I'm just going to give it a name. You can give it a description, so later you can go back and look at it, just like any other chain set. And we can add it. Now, there's two things that we're going to have to add. I'm going to go into there's three things we're going to have to add. We're going to add, I'm glad I came in here. We didn't look at the dispatcher. I'll show you the dispatcher really quick after we create this. So I'm going to add my utility in my dispatcher. I'm going to add my test. If you don't add your test, it's not going to deploy. So we're going to add those to our chain set. We're going to go back and we're going to add our trigger. So here's our trigger. And then one other thing that I like to do before I upload this is I like to go in and view the dependencies. I'm not going to select all the dependencies. I just want to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And one of the things that I do know is that we have this new inventory object that has not been uploaded. So I'm going to select that. We have the order fulfillment. That's already done. Its record type is on the inventory, so we're going to take that. And that one. And everything else is already, we're going to say that's already in production. So we're going to add those to our chain sets. If it's not in production, again, your test is going to fail. You're going to have to go back, clone your chain set, add them, and upload it. And then we can upload it. We don't have any sandboxes for this one since this is a dev org. Excellent question. So that's kind of how you do. All your deployment would be done in sandboxes. Bigger organizations have more complicated development setups. Some of them will have a sandbox for each developer, and they all push to a single sandbox. Some organizations just have one sandbox with one or two developers. It all depends on the size of the organization. All right, any other questions?
That's all the questions we have coming in today.
All right. Excellent questions today. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fred. Thank everybody for your participation today. Next week we will be talking about setting up a community and what's involved there and how that works a little bit. So again, thank you. Feel free to keep joining us. Send us your questions, review past webinars, and have a wonderful weekend.